Hello everyone and welcome back to the Dungeon Learner's Guide. This week we've got another Commander's Guild deck tech. This is our 87th deck and it's titled Every Day I'm Postlin. And if you haven't seen this show before, what we are doing is randomly selecting a card from Scryfall.com, working with a budget of $100 or less, and building a commander deck for Magic the Gathering around a theme of the chosen card. So very quickly, before we get into the deck itself, I do want to take a second to highlight some of the ways that you can reach out to us or support the channel if that's something you're interested in doing. So first up, you can follow us over on Twitter at 13POYNZ, Reddit u/POYNZ13, or email dungeonlearnersguide@gmail.com. All of those are great ways to reach out to us, and I'm always happy to respond if anyone has any questions or wants to suggest any cards for any of the decks. After that, though, if you're looking to support the channel a little bit more directly, you can use our TCG Player affiliate link, which is in the description of the video, or head on over to patreon.com/dungeonlearnersguide, where we will give you access to things like the deck lists a week early. We'll give you access to a Discord channel where you can help us build some of the decks, and there's also a ton of great people. That's where we play a lot of the games, so if you want to be in some of the games for the channel, that's a great place to go. And of course, you'll also get the access to things like the unedited gameplay videos, so you can hear the players talking and kind of joking amongst themselves rather than just my own narration. And of course, one of our random cards sent to you every single month as a thank you for your support. And I do have to shout out our 4 current patrons. We have William Swiftfoot, we've got Doodle, Eric Hui, and of course Calvin Schmidt. So to the 4 of you, thank you all so much for all of your support. And if none of that is your style, I completely understand. You can always just like the video, subscribe to the channel. That does help out as well. So with all of that talking out of the way, let's get to the deck tech. So first up, we got to talk about our random card of the week, which was suggested to us by Observer Will over on Patreon. And that card is Shadowborn Apostle. Now, Shadowborn Apostle is 1 black mana for a 1/1 human cleric. A deck can have any number of cards named Shadowborn Apostle, and you can pay a black, sacrifice 6 creatures named Shadowborn Apostle, search your library for a demon creature card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Now, notably, this card was just reprinted, so it is pretty cheap right now. I know it's $1.61 just for a common, but you've got to keep in mind that we have 20 of this card in our deck. So that means that we're already dedicating a huge chunk of our budget to this card. And the nice thing about this is that there are a ton of different commanders we can work with. Now, when I was first looking at commanders, I knew I wanted to add a color to it, but I wasn't quite sure what color I wanted to add. But eventually I found Hogaak, Arisen, Necropolis. So this is a little bit unique, but Hogaak is 5 and then a hybrid Golgari for an 8/8 legendary creature avatar. You can't spend mana to cast this spell. It has Convoke, Delve, and you may cast Hogaak from your graveyard, plus it has Trample. So the general idea here is that if we get a ton of Shadowborn Apostles into play, which isn't crazy because they're all 1 mana, we can then use them to convoke Hogaak by tapping them instead of our lands to pay for this big monster. That also means we can exile cards out our graveyard. I would be willing to bet that a lot of our Shadowborn Apostles are going to die, so that is one of the big synergies of the deck when it comes to the commander. There are, of course, some other themes and some other main reasons that I wanted to make sure that we were in the Golgari colors. So let's talk about some of those, and then we'll kind of break down some key cards as well. So the first theme for the deck is going to be demons. Since Shadowborn Apostle can sacrifice themselves, or I guess more accurately, 6 of them can sacrifice themselves to search our library for a demon and put it directly into play, we want to make sure that we have demons that are gonna be good targets. So that leads us to things like Shadowborn Demon, which is 3 black for a 5/6 demon. It's got flying. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-demon creature. Great, that's just removal. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if there are fewer than 6 creature cards in your graveyard, sacrifice a creature. So not a great thing to have, but if we do get this card by sacrificing all of our Shadowborn Apostles, that's 6 Shadowborn Apostles that are sacrificed, 6 creatures in the graveyard, and then we don't have to sacrifice a creature. So Shadowborn Demon is a great example of some of the stuff we can get with this deck, but it is by no means one of the best, and we'll talk about some of those later. Our next theme, though, is that because all of the Shadowborn Apostles are clerics, we have cards that actually care about clerics. So we have things like Dark Supplicant, which is a single black for a 1/1 cleric that says tap, sacrifice 3 clerics, search your graveyard, hand, and or library for a card named Scion of Darkness and put it into play. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. Of course, we do have the Scion of Darkness because not only is it great with Dark Supplicant, but it is actually a demon. So Dark Supplicant kind of lets us get the Scion of Darkness for only sacrificing 3 clerics instead of the whole 6 for the Shadowborn Apostles. So it's a little bit quicker and a little bit more efficient, but it only gets one specific demon. But because all of the Shadowborn Apostles are clerics, it's a great benefit for this card. And then that leads us to our last theme for the deck, and that is going to be cards that shouldn't really work in Commander, but do. So in other words, it's cards that care about cards with the same name. And a good example of that is Double Enchant, which is 5 and a green for a sorcery. For each creature you control, you may search your library for a creature card with the same name as that creature, put those cards onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So if we have 5 Shadowborn Apostles in play, we can cast Double Enchant, choosing each of those 5 Shadowborn Apostles, and then searching our library for 5 more Shadowborn Apostles and putting them directly into play. So that can be incredibly powerful and kind of surprise our opponents because they don't have to tap to sacrifice themselves to get a demon. But this is a great card for when we're trying to do things that are a little bit sneaky, doing things our opponents might not expect, and it's a nice way to be able to get more Shadowborn Apostles than we probably should at any given time. So those are our themes for the week, and the next thing we got to talk about are some of our key cards, some of the cards that work very well to kind of push us toward a victory and help synergize with what we're doing. The first of which is going to be Taborax Hope's Demise, and this actually works for a couple of different reasons. So Taborax is 2 and a black for a 2/2 legendary creature, Demon Cleric. It has flying, and Taborax has lifelink as long as it has 5 or more +1/+1 counters on it. And whenever another non-token creature you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Taborax. If that creature was a cleric, you may draw a card. If you do, you lose 1 life. So Taborax is a demon, so we can search it out with all of our Shadowborn Apostles. And all of our Shadowborn Apostles are clerics, so that we get to draw cards when they die if Taborax is in play. This is a huge benefit for what we're trying to do, because if we can somehow manage to activate our Shadowborn Apostles, we sacrifice 6 of them, that triggers Taborax 6 times, he gets 6 +1/+1 counters, he immediately becomes an 8/8 with lifelink and flying, and we lose 6 life, and we draw 6 cards. So that becomes a huge swing in our favor, not to mention the fact that we also get to tutor a demon directly into play. So Taborax really does everything we want to do and kind of pays us off for just running our game plan the way that we've planned it. That leads us, though, to our next key card, which is going to be Thrumming Stone. So Thrumming Stone, again, another card that benefited from a recent reprinting, used to be about $20-something, is now down to about $2. But Thrumming Stone is 5 mana for a legendary artifact that says spells you cast have Ripple 4, which is a really weird wording because they don't do Ripple too much anymore, but it says whenever you cast a spell, you may reveal the top 4 cards of your library, and you may cast spells with the same name as that spell from among the revealed cards without paying their mana costs. Put the rest on the bottom of your library. So if we cast a Shadowborn Apostle, we then look at the top 4 cards of our library, and we cast all the Shadowborn Apostles from among them. Each of those Shadowborn Apostles lets us look at the next top 4, and we keep that train going. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that we have Thrumming Stone in play, we cast a Shadowborn Apostle, and we just kind of ripple through our entire deck, putting every other Shadowborn Apostle into play. Now, that's not incredibly likely because it is Ripple 4, so we only look at 4 cards, but statistically, looking at our deck, we have 20 Shadowborn Apostles. That is a 1/5 of our deck. So in theory, we should be able to hit one off a Ripple 4 most of the time. Now, again, that's not always how it's going to work. You will miss sometimes, but they're also just 1 mana. So if you miss on one, you can just maybe play another one that's in your hand. So Thrumming Stone, super powerful. It's really a great way to get a ton of value out of the cards that have the same name. And it's super great for what we're trying to do here. And then finally, our last key card, also an artifact, is Mirror Box. Mirror Box, 3 mana for an artifact. The legend rule doesn't apply to permanents you control. Each legendary creature you control gets +1/+1, and I can already hear the questions like, why would we want this? We're not a legendary creatures deck, and it's because of the last ability that says each non-token creature you control gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control with the same name as that creature. So if we have 5 Shadowborn Apostles, they're each getting +1/+1 for each other Shadowborn Apostle in play, meaning that our 5 little 1/1s are now actually 5 5/5s. And that alone can end out a game much faster than just our little Shadowborn Apostles, because there is a good chance that our opponents won't want us to have a ton of Shadowborns in play, or they'll have some way to stop us from getting our demons. So if we can just start beating down with our little 1/1s, then we can kind of close out the game in a way that our opponents might not expect. So those are our key cards, and that does lead us to the final stage of this deck tech, where we are going to talk about some cool interactions. And the cool interactions in this deck are a little bit weird because some of them work very well together and some of them are a little bit more abstract. So we'll start with a little bit of an abstract one, and that is going to be between Dreadfast Demon and Echoing Courage. So Dreadfast Demon, 5 black for a 6/6 demon. It's got flying. At the beginning of your end step, sacrifice a non-demon creature. If you do, create a token that's a copy of Dreadfast Demon. So if we have Dreadfast Demon, at the end of our turn, we sacrifice, maybe say a Shadowborn Apostle, we make a second Dreadfast Demon. At the end of our next turn, they both trigger, we sacrifice 2 more creatures, now we have 4 Dreadfast Demons. That continues on, we go to 8, 16, whatever. So if we cast something like Echoing Courage, which is 1 and a green for an instant, target creature and all other creatures with the same name as that creature get +2/+2 until end of turn. So this doesn't wind up doing a ton in the deck because a lot of times we're just turning our Shadowborn Apostles into 3/3s instead of 1/1s. But with Dreadfast Demon, they're going from 6/6 flyers to 8/8 flyers. And that can close out the game a lot faster than you might expect, especially when our opponents are thinking that they might not die, they might have enough blockers, or they might have enough life. We can kind of change the math on them at any given time for only 2 mana. So Dreadfast Demon is a great card in this deck, and it's absolutely perfect for what we want to be doing. Echoing Courage, very good with the Apostles and with the Demon, but I wanted to highlight this interaction because, honestly, I just think it's kind of cool. And what's the point of a cool interaction if I can't talk about things that are cool? So that is the first of the 2 cool interactions we're going to talk about. The second one is going to be between Secret Salvage and Blood Bond March. So I'm not going to lie, Blood Bond March is another big reason I wanted to be in the Golgari colors, because it's 2 black-green for an enchantment. Whenever a creature spell is played, each player returns all cards with the same name as that spell from their graveyard to play. So if we have 6 Shadowborn Apostles in the graveyard, we can then cast a Shadowborn Apostle, bring all of them back into play, sacrifice 6 of them, get a demon, play another Shadowborn Apostle, bring back all 6 of them, do it again. So we can continuously get our creatures back, as long as they're not exiled, with the Blood Bond March. And we're going to pair that up with Secret Salvage, which is 3 black for a sorcery. Exile target non-land card from your graveyard, and then search your library for any number of cards with the same name as that card, reveal them and put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. So this gives us a ton of Shadowborn Apostles in our hand to do exactly what we were just saying. If we search out, we'll say 10 Shadowborn Apostles and we put them into our hand, we can then cast 1, get all the ones out of our graveyard, sacrifice them to get a demon, cast another, bring them all back, sacrifice them again, get another demon, and we can get out of hand very, very quickly. And if we get to the point where we're at the end of our turn, we have no mana, we have to discard all of our Shadowborn Apostles because we don't have no maximum hand size, then we can next turn use Bloodborne March, we cast another Shadowborn Apostle, and we get all the ones we just discarded back into play. So this is a huge swing in our favor and can really get most of the big creatures out of our deck if we're given the chance. So a very fun interaction, very cool. Once again, Obviously, that's why it's called Cool Interactions. But let's get to the end of our deck tech because we got to talk about the price of this deck. And this week, our price came in at $78.16. And I'm not going to lie to you, the price has fluctuated a little bit since I put it together, but it's currently floating around $78.16. So the reason for that, though, is because since our deck is mostly Shadowborn Apostles, if the price on the Apostles fluctuates in any way, whether it goes up or goes down, the overall price of the deck is going to fluctuate as well. So that is something to be aware of if this is a kind of deck that you are interested in putting together. But our most expensive card in the entire deck is actually not too expensive. It's only $4.44, and it's Ayara, First of Lochthwain. So Ayara is black, black, black for a 2/3 legendary creature, Elf Noble. Whenever Ayara, First of Lochthwain, or another black creature enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And tap, sacrifice another black creature, draw a card. It is very worth noting that Shadowborn Apostle is a black creature. So every time we play a Shadowborn Apostle, our opponents will lose a life, will gain a life, and we can tap, sacrifice it to draw a card. So Ayara is perfect for what we want to be doing with this deck. And it really does everything we're aiming to do and also gives us a little bit of reach, being able to kill our opponents beyond combat damage, beyond all of our demons. So that is incredibly important as well. But like I mentioned, she is about $4. So if you wanted to trim the price of the deck down to about $74, $73, she would be a card to cut. On the other hand, if you're interested in actually increasing the price of the deck and you want to look at some cards that I think are great fits for the deck but don't quite fit into our budget limit, I have 2 main suggestions for you. And I'm going to be upfront with you. They are both demons. They're both out-of-budget demons that I would like to include in this deck if I could. So the first of those 2 demons is going to be Razaketh the Foul-Blooded. Razaketh is 5 black, black, black for an 8/8 legendary creature demon. He's got flying, he's got trample, and you can pay 2 life, sacrifice another creature, search your library for a card, and put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. So Razaketh lets us basically search our deck for whatever we want as long as we can sacrifice a creature, which we should have tons of Shadowborn Apostles, so we can always sacrifice a creature. And it's just a massive 8/8 with flying and trample. So not only can it close out the game on its own, but it can help us find other cards that will also close out the game. And so the card that I would recommend swapping out for this is March of Burgeoning Life, which is X and a green for an instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may exile any number of green cards from your hand. This spell costs 2 less to cast for each card exiled this way. Then, you can choose target creature with mana value less than X, search your library for a creature card with the same name as that creature, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Now, the reason I'm going to suggest taking this one out is that there's no real great way for this to be incredibly impressive. It's usually just kind of okay, because at its worst, it's 2 mana for at instant speed to get another Shadowborn Apostle out of our deck and put it onto the battlefield. That's okay, but it's just 1 Shadowborn Apostle. It's basically like our 21st copy of Shadowborn Apostle. We just have to spend an extra green mana to make it instant speed. So it's not horrible, but it's nowhere near the level that Razaketh would be. So if you have the chance to include Razaketh, like I said, I would recommend taking out the March. Now, this does lead us to our next demon, though, and this one is a big one. This one is going to be Archfiend of Despair. And Archfiend of Despair is a massive 6 black, black for a 6/6 flyer that says your opponents can't gain life, and at the beginning of each end step, each opponent loses life equal to the life that player lost this turn. This is a huge $48.88 card. This is almost $50. This card alone would be half of our budget limit for this deck. However, it is a huge win condition for this deck as well. Stopping our opponents from gaining life is great because it helps keep our opponents within reach, but what it also does is it allows us to double up on any damage we would do. So if we do 5 damage to an opponent, then at the end of our turn, they lose 5 more life. So Archfiend of Despair kind of gives all of our stuff double the damage or double strike or however you want to look at it. On the other hand, the card that I would recommend taking out of the deck is going to be Overseer of the Damned, which is 5 black for a 5/5 demon. It's got flying. When it enters the battlefield, you may destroy target creature. That is very good. And whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, make a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token. So overall, this is very good. But the issue that I ran into with this in the deck is that we're not setting out to kill our opponent's creatures most of the time. We would much rather kill our own creatures. So yeah, it's great that it gives us zombies, but without a dedicated way of destroying our opponent's creatures, a lot of times it kind of gets hated out of the game a lot more than it should, because our opponents expect us to be doing more with it. So I think for that aspect, if we're going to play a card that's going to get us kind of hated out, we probably want to play the one that's actually going to close out the game, like Archfiend of Despair. So that is my recommendation for the out-of-budget upgrade section. And the very last thing we got to do with this deck is actually see how it performs in a game. So we are going to run this deck up against 3 separate opponents, and we're going to find out just how good our Shadowborn Apostles are. So this week, we are playing against Shawn, who is playing his Gitrog monster deck, Jason playing his Jace Vryn's Prodigy deck, and Bilal playing his Mirkul Lord of Bones deck. So up first, Shawn's Gitrog monster deck. I'm going to be honest, before we even get to the other two, this is by far the deck I am the most afraid of. Shawn has put a lot of fine-tuning into this deck, and it's a deck that can win very, very quickly. So I think that we need to make sure we can kind of get a ground presence early, hopefully try to get some demons very quickly, kind of pressure his life total, and make sure that he's unable to keep on top of casting a bunch of spells and replaying lands with the Gitrog monster. But his goal is, like I said, to just win very, very quickly. So definitely a big concern on my end. Next up, we have Jason and his Jace deck, and this is almost like a Jace tribal deck. He wants to play as many cards that feature Jace, that have Jace in the name, have Jace in the artwork, that kind of play around with the Jace Planeswalker, because it is one of his favorite Planeswalkers. And then, of course, not only is Jace a human wizard on the front, but he's got a backside where he is the Planeswalker of Jace, of course. So that is probably going to be a big synergy of his deck, is all the Jace cards care about drawing cards, they care about milling cards. There's probably going to be some control in there as well, so I'm hoping we can kind of let Jason deal with the Gitrog monster, and maybe we can sneak in some Shadowborn Apostles. And then finally, last up, we have Bilal and his Mirkul Lord of Bones deck. Now, I've never played against a Mirkul deck, but I would imagine it's a lot of enchantments. I would imagine it's a lot of creatures. And there's a good chance that he is kind of trying to do some of the same things we are, in the sense that he wants to kill off his own creatures or sacrifice them to bring them back as enchantments so that their abilities kind of stay on the board. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's at least one, maybe more infinite combos in here, because there are some creatures that once they are turned into enchantments can just go infinite with themselves. So definitely something to pay attention to, but I am very excited for this game. I'm interested to see how it goes. So I hope you all enjoy it. Please do like the video, subscribe to the channel if you do, and I will talk to you all once the game is done. At the start of the game, Shawn goes first, followed by myself, Jason, and then Bilal. On Shawn's first turn, he plays a Nurturing Peatland and casts Jiraga Tree Speaker. I play a Swamp and cast Shadowborn Apostle. Jason plays an Island. Bilal plays a Plains. Shawn plays a Command Tower and then levels up Jiraga Tree Speaker, giving it the ability to tap for 2 green mana. I play a Blighted Woodland, move to combat, attacking Bilal for 1, and then in my second main phase, I cast a Golgari Signet. Jason plays an Island and casts Arcane Signet. Bilal plays a Forest. Shawn plays an Overgrown Tomb untapped, paying 2 life, and then casts his commander, the Gitrog monster, letting him play an additional land on each of his turns, sacrifice a land in his upkeep, and also draw a card whenever a land goes to his graveyard. I cast Tabarak's Hope's Demise, which gets a +1/+1 counter whenever another of my non-token creatures dies, and also lets me draw a card and lose a life if that creature was a cleric. I then attack Jason for 1 and pass. Jason plays an Island and casts his commander, Jace Vryn's Prodigy. Bilal plays a Swamp. In Shawn's upkeep, he sacrifices Nurturing Peatland, drawing a card, and then plays a Fabled Passage, immediately sacrificing it to search his library for a basic land, putting it into play tapped. In response, Bilal flashes in Archivist of Agma, letting him gain a life and draw a card whenever an opponent searches their library, triggering immediately from Shawn's search. Shawn then plays a Bojuka Bog, exiling my graveyard, sending a message, and casts Harrow, sacrificing a forest, drawing a card, and then searching his library for 2 basic lands, putting them into play. This also lets Bilal draw a card and gain a life. Then Shawn casts Courser of Kruphix, letting him play with the top card of his library revealed, play lands from the top of his library, and gain a life whenever a land enters under his control. I play a Temple of Malady, scrying 1, and cast Desperate Research, naming Shadowborn Apostle, revealing the top 7 cards of my library, putting all Shadowborn Apostles, 3 in this case, into my hand and then exiling the rest. I then cast one of the Shadowborn Apostles and move to combat, attacking Shawn for 2 with Taborax. Jason plays an island, and then casts and kicks Jace Mirror Mage, making a copy of it when it enters. He activates the original Jace's +1 ability to scry 2, and then activates the copy's 0 ability to reveal the top card of his library, put it into his hand, and lose life equal to its mana value. This has him revealing an island, losing no life. Bilal plays a Plains and casts Destiny Spinner, making his creatures and enchantments unable to be countered. He then casts Cruel Celebrant, allowing him to gain a life and make each opponent lose a life whenever one of his creatures dies. In Shawn's upkeep, he sacrifices a forest to the Gitrog monster, drawing a card, and then casts Scourge Familiar, allowing him to discard a card to make a black mana. This lets him discard Dakmor Salvage to make a black mana and trigger Gitrog, drawing Shawn a card, which he can replace with a Dredge on Dakmor Salvage, putting it back into his hand and repeating this process. This allows him to infinitely cycle through his deck, shuffling everything back in if he hits Kozilek Butcher of Truth, and eventually casting Exsanguinate with his infinite mana to gain infinite life and make each opponent lose infinite life, winning Shawn the game. Alright, so that was a sweet game, a very fast game. That game actually ended on Shawn's turn 5, which means it was everybody else's turn 4. So a very, very quick win from Shawn's Gitrog monster deck, which, like I said in the intro, that's pretty much exactly what he wants to be doing anyway. I don't think we got a ton of chances to show off what our deck could do. I mean, like I said, we died on our turn 4. But we were able to start seeing some of the synergies that could happen. We had Taborax, I had a few more Shadowborn Apostles and other clerics in my hand, so there is a chance that if we had had a turn or 2, we might have been able to get quite a presence and probably gotten even a demon in play, so definitely not the best showing by our deck, but again, what can you really do in 4 turns? Jason and Bilal, kind of a similar situation, really didn't get the chance to do anything. It was all Shawn from the get-go in that game, but Gitrog really did exactly what he wanted it to do. And he even mentioned that he got kind of lucky with the fact that he had his discard outlet that made mana, plus the land that could be dredging. So definitely got exactly what he wanted when he needed it, and a very impressive showing from the Gitrog monster. So overall, like I said, I know the deck didn't quite do everything that I know it can, but maybe you can put it together and let me know how that goes for you. I hope you liked the video, hope you liked the deck tech, the gameplay. If you did, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all on the other side of the Dungeon Learner's Guide.